Good evening from Vietnam, Karin. Thanks a lot for spending your morning to join our Inside Sharing show. And on behalf of our listeners of the show, I would like to say thank you for your generosity to spend your time with us.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Karin, have you been to Vietnam before?
I have not been to Vietnam. I have been to Southeast Asia. We spent time in Kuala Lumpur, Thailand. We were in Cambodia. We actually do a lot of, we build clean water wells in Cambodia. And so that's about as close as I've gotten.
So Cambodia to Vietnam is just a fine line in the map, right? Just a fine line in the map. So next time if you travel to this part of the world, now you have a new friend, a new
Yes.
family that will welcome you and your family if you guys travel to Vietnam, okay?
Oh, thank you so much.
And Karen, in our culture, it's very honor for our audience if we can have you to introduce a little bit about you and the works that you do. Would you do that for us?
Oh, absolutely. So, my husband and I run a company called Let's Grow Leaders, and we are very much about human-centered leadership and very practical tools and techniques. And we work across a variety of industries. Some of the really big names that you would know, like Nestle, and then some of the fast-growing startups, especially in tech, has been a really nice sweet spot for us. Before founding Let's Grow Leaders, I was at Verizon for 20 years. So I was in HR for a decade, everything HR, leadership development, organizational development, merger integration. And then I led a variety of field assignments, a 2,200 person sales team, a 10,000 person customer service organization. And the reason I share that is everything we do is based on experience. It's not just a lot of research or theory, although we have that. It is really about what will serve your team, you as a leader well, and in a very practical way. We've written a couple of books. Our latest is Courageous Cultures, How to Build Teams of Micro-Innovators, Problem Solvers, and Customer Advocates.
Thanks a lot for sharing your amazing journey together with David in about less than 2 minutes. So it's not enough time for us to absorb that much information. So let's examine that journey together tonight. All right?
Okay, sounds great.
Alrighty. So let's travel time. When I was young, Karin, I always wanted to become an astronaut, wearing the suit and jumping in different planets, right? But life did not give me any chance to do that. So I'm curious to know when Karin was young, what was her dream about the future and the works that she's gonna do?
It's funny, when I was very little, I really, really wanted to be a Broadway star. And my cousins, they all laugh, right? We're in our 50s now, and they all laugh and like, you have been doing shows for your entire life. And so I used to gather all my little cousins together. I was the oldest. And at Christmas or Thanksgiving, I had everybody doing little songs and dances, and I had a whole program. And it's just funny because I kind of do shows for a living now, right? And with my keynote speaking. And so it's come full circle. So I think I never said, oh, I want to run a leadership development company. That certainly, but it has been interesting to see how the passions have played out over time. I've also really been in leadership roles from the minute I can remember. So always interested in that in school. College, I was my sorority president. It seems like whatever I do, I end up being in a leadership role, and that just kind of evolves naturally. And it's just interesting how the passions play out. I really love people, and I love working with people. I love helping people come together to accomplish something important, and that's always been a passion of mine as well.
Steve Jobs famously said that, oh, you can only connect the dot backward, right? So now, the dream when you were young all come back to the full circle of that is how beautiful it is. So I'm curious, as the young Karen wanted to be a Broadway stars, right? And then when she grow up, she can do any major to study anything that she can get in and any job that she could be doing. So why did she get into the field of human resources and training people and training leadership? So
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I majored in college in speech communication and the theater arts. Okay, so still, right, still there. But when I got in and started taking my classes, so I was taking public speaking classes and I took theater classes. But what I was really fell in love with there was the organizational communication classes. And that is where, you know, a lot of interpersonal communication, team communication, leadership, theory, and understanding how systems work. And that's where I really discovered the passion. And so when I graduated from college, I really wanted to work in human resources. But back in that day, nobody would give somebody a job in human resources without human resources experience. It was a really challenging issue. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just go get a job. And so I went and worked at a bank where they put me through it was a leadership program. And the idea was they were going to teach you leadership skills, but then they were going to also rotate you through all these different assignments in the bank. And then you graduate. And then the commitment was I could then move into any area of the bank that I was really interested in. So I'm thinking that's how I'm going to get into HR. So I do that. Apparently I graduated at the top of the class, and because of that, they said, you must be a financial lending, because that's where our best rock star people go. And I'm like, oh, I can't imagine a worse job for somebody like me. And I'm all for people who are good at that and want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that job. It's just not a good job for me. And so I quit, and I said, that wasn't fair. That's not what you said. And so then the next pivot was I worked for a very small company, which was a bank consulting firm. But I did all their marketing and public relations for that, which was more consistent with my major. And that was really fun. But it was because I had a lot of autonomy from a strategic perspective at a super young age. I was like 24, you know, and I got to work directly with the CEO, which was fantastic. I am a pretty good writer, so even back then, so I did some ghost writing for him, and he was writing books. So I got it. You know, it's interesting how this all plays out, these experiences, right? So I got to be involved in writing a book, even when not under my name, even back then, that young. So then I was, but I'm still not working in HR, right? So about 3 years into that, I decided to, so while I was doing that, I was working on my master's degree in organizational development at night. So I was working the day and then at night doing that. And that was a very intense period of time because I was trying to do that very quickly. So I was taking a lot of classes. So then I get my master's degree and I still can't get a job at HR. And I'm like, ugh. So I decided to go get a PhD. And so I quit that job, the bank consulting job, and went to work on my PhD full time. And I was teaching at the university as well. So I had a scholarship. So I would teach speech communication classes in the day, and then I would take these PhD classes in organizational communication. And it was really interesting because I was reading this article. I was studying self-directed work teams was the big name thing at the time. This is a very long time ago. But, you know, it's all about empowerment, right? So I'm studying this, I'm doing all this research, and I read this guy, his name is Hank Sims, and he keeps coming up in the literature, and I was like, I wonder where this guy works, because I'm studying in the communication department. And I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's at the University of Maryland. I'm at the University of Maryland. So I literally go running across the campus with his book, and I knock on his door, and he's sitting in his office. He's like, hello. And I said, I'm just so young and so enthusiastic. And I said, I can't believe this. I have been sitting here across the campus, reading your research, quoting your stuff. You're right here. And he opened his door, I think because I was so gung-ho, and we sat there for 2 hours. And he said, what is it why do you want a PhD? And I said, I want to work in HR. And he just laughed, and he's like, you don't need a PhD. You need a contact. And
Wow.
so he said, why don't you come to lunch? Let me call one of my old students. She just graduated from here. Her name is Margaret Sears. She works at Bell Atlantic, which became Verizon. And I'm going to buy you guys lunch.
So
And
beautiful.
so he took us to lunch, and Margaret said, do you want to try to do some projects for us? She's like, I can't pay you much, but I can pay you like an intern. I'm like, great. Now I'm working in HR, right? So I get to work on self-directed work teams, which is what my research was on. And we get in, and about 6 months into that, she says, I have an opening. Do you want to come do this full time? And it was my dream job. I was going to do this major culture change initiative at this big company. And so I never finished the PhD, but I went back. So I went and just did this full time. And then I was at Verizon for 20 years after that. So that's how it all started.
Wow, Karin, how interesting. What makes you so interested in HR that you got a management training program at the bank, and then you resign because they did not let you to go into the HR division but go to the financial loan, right? And then you get another job, but then you could not get into the HR role also, so you went back to you went back on to study your master, and then you went on to study PhD so that you can get into the human resource space. Why is that running into your veins that strong like that, Karin?
Isn't that crazy? I mean, I think I really have meant to do this to grow
Oh,
leaders, and it's interesting because, you could say, well, you led a sales team, you led a retail sales team. That's not, growing leaders, but yes, it is, right? So every single role I took, at Verizon, once I got out of HR, which was deliberately building all these leadership development programs, and I did a lot of that, and I led a 300-person training team over there, and where we designed all kinds of programs. I built mentoring programs, so I learned how to build really good, robust programs. But the most fun I had was when I was actually leading these teams. So here's another story of how this all plays out. So I had been in HR for 10 years, and I was working on a big merger integration project. And one of the guys on the project was named Ray Wisbicki, and he was the senior vice president of customer service. And we get through this really intense period of working together. He is not my boss. And he says to me, hey, Karin, what do you want to do next? Which is really nice, right? And I said, oh, I'll probably be VP of HR. He goes, yeah, you could be VP of HR. I see that. You're already doing that role pretty much. But if you take a VP of HR role, you're going to stay in HR the rest of your life. Now, here's the thing. How hard did I try to work to get into HR? That does not sound like a bad idea for me. And he says, you have all these programs to develop leaders, but you've never led a team here of more than 35 people. He said, I'd like to see you lead a large team. And because then, if you're going to teach people to develop leaders, you're going to have a lot more credibility if you have really led large teams. I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, go lead some of our call centers or lead a large sales team. I said, who's going to do that? Who's going to put me in a 500-person call center with no call center experience? He said, oh, don't take my word for it. Go talk to my 4 VPs of customer service, my direct reports, and see if they would put you in that role. So I went to each one of them, and they said, 3 out of 4 of them said, absolutely, in a heartbeat. You are all about culture and engagement. That's what we need in call centers. 100%. We can teach you the rest. One of them said, nah, you belong in HR. And then about 6 months later, one of these VPs had me come to her call center because we had to fire the call center director because of unethical behavior. And I'm sitting there, and we go through this horrible termination, which is never easy to fire somebody, even if they did something wrong. And I'm feeling bad for him, and I'm thinking about what's going to happen to this call center. And I said, so, all right, well, let's take out the succession planning list. Who are you going to put in this role? And she says, you. So I was pregnant, and she did not know I was pregnant. And so then I'm like, oh, do I take on this new big job and I'm pregnant? And so I told her, and she said, Do you think I'm really going to tell the director of HR I'm not going to hire her because she's pregnant? Right? Because that would be discrimination. She's like, I've offered you the job. We'll work it out. So I did that job. And because I had the confidence of that I could do something completely different, then when the opportunity came to lead this very large sales team, I'm like, well, I can do that. All I have to do is bring my leadership development, my culture approach, my how do you develop people, my change management, my strategic vision. Those are the competencies that I have. And with that, I could do almost anything. So, that's how you build confidence, right? Trying things that scare you and succeeding in them. And so that's how this kind of played out along the way. But I think I've always been doing leadership development, culture change work, even when I was selling phones.
Wow. Karin, but confidence sometimes is not enough in the equation. There has to be something else there inside of you that letting you to be like the book you say, courageous. You gave yourself the courageous to go into the unknown and explore that all together. So what did you give yourself back then? What message did you give you?
I don't know. It's funny. I like new things. I like to feel challenged. One of the things I always say is, I always feel like if I don't feel like I've just jumped out of an airplane, I'm not that happy. And, it's this, I think it's a similar leap of leaving Verizon and starting my own company. That was very, very scary, but it was also exciting, and I think I do have a lot of confidence. I don't know. And I have a lot of insecurity, just like everyone else too, it might not work. But one of the things that I always tell myself is, what is the worst thing that could happen? And so, for example, in moving from HR, I had a very good reputation in HR. I really think I really was very good at that, and I had a good brand in that. So I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? If I go to call centers and I'm a flop, they're not going to fire me. They're going to put me back in HR. And that's the worst. That's the very worst thing that could happen. And I like HR. So, I think that's the thing. And when I left Verizon to start Let's Grow Leaders, I thought, all right, what's the worst thing that could happen? Now, I left a lot of money on the table in retirement and things that I would have lost money. Okay, that's bad if I can't make it up and make this company work. But the very worst thing is I go get another job, right? I have a very strong background. So the worst thing that happens is my company doesn't work and I go back and find some other place to work. I haven't had to do that. So I think that's part of where confidence comes from. I worry, sometimes I talk to people who are like, well, but what if it doesn't work? I'm like, so what really is, nobody's going to die here, right? And, you have to make wise choices and you don't want to put your family in jeopardy. But, and I do take calculated risks. When I left Verizon, I had been blogging for 3 years. So I didn't do it casually, right? I had already built my brand. I already had a website going. That wasn't great, but it was a start, So.
Karin, I'm curious because when you were attending your PhD program, right? You got a chance to talk to Professor Ted Sims, or what's the name?
Hank Sims, yeah.
Ted Sims, right?
Yeah.
And he told you that you don't need a PhD program, degree to do the HR. You need a contact, so that's why you met Margaret, right? Yeah. And then so you got into the career that you love for a very long time. You got into the role of HR after 6 months of probation, then of the internship, and you got a job. Then 10 years later, you talked to the gentleman who college of you. His name was Rick, right?
Ray was Vicky, yeah.
Okay, alrighty. So he told you to try something new, and you took his word on, and later on you led the operational team, the customer service team, then you move on with the sales team, right? So I'm curious, before you open your own company, Let's Grow Leader, was there anybody talk to you about that idea?
this is so fun because I haven't really thought about my career in this way, like the people to, like, I've always thought about the individual incidents, but you're right. Every time there's a person. So here's so this is the story next. So my last job at Verizon was to lead all of our outsourced call centers, our BPOs, that were taking Verizon, so other companies taking Verizon calls. And I had been put into that role because Verizon had started selling the iPhone pretty suddenly. First they didn't have permission to sell. AT&T had exclusive rights, and then they had permission. So they had sort of had a customer service emergency, right? They had all these calls coming in, and they didn't have enough internal call centers to take the calls. So they reached out to all these other companies, these BPOs, and ramped them up very, very fast. And what happened was these companies all wanted to take Verizon's calls. They wanted that work. So they're like, sure, we can build a 500-person call center in 2 weeks. You can't build a 500-person call center in 2 weeks. Not well, right? So the customer experience was really bad. So they knew I knew culture. So they pulled me out of my sales job and said, can you come and look at all these 33 call centers that are taking Verizon's calls and reconcile the portfolio? And I'm like, what do you mean reconcile the portfolio? That sounds, they're like, well, figure out which ones to fire. I was like, oh, that does not sound like a human-centered job for me. I said, but what if instead I go and figure out how we can help these centers get to a better customer experience and get the same customer experience that are happening in our internal centers? Would you like that? That sounds like a job I could get my arms around. And they're like, of course we would like that because it's a cheaper way to take the calls, right? So I began working with these centers. Now, a couple of them, they didn't make it, but most of them we were able to transform. So you're like, where is this getting to the people? So here's where it's getting to the people. So while I'm doing this, I start writing the blog. I still have no intention of leaving Verizon, but I'm writing the blog so the people in these call centers can hear my message. Because of there's certain rules when you're working with BPOs, you're not allowed to go do leadership development for them. They have to do that of their own because of co-employment law and stuff. But they can read an external blog. So I was writing this blog in the hopes that the leaders in these call centers would read my blog. And what happened was the blog took off. It started getting an international following, and I'm still at Verizon. And one of the VPs of one of these call centers says, Karin, would you be, I'm part of the International Customer Service Association. Would you be our keynote speaker? And I said, your keynote speaker? He's like, yeah, come tell this story of what we just did here. So I took the day off. I flew to Florida. I gave my first keynote speech. And I get off the stage, and the guy coming up next says, his name is Shep Hyken. He says, Karin, when are you leaving?
Shep Hyken.
You know him?
Yeah, I know Shep. I interviewed him, yes.
All right, well, how about that? So Shep says to me, Karin, when are you leaving Verizon? And I said, did I say that from the stage? Because I was awfully nervous. I don't know what I said. He's like, no, but you are clearly meant to do this. And he says, look, if you want to become a keynote speaker, here's my card. Call me. I'm the president of the National Speakers Association. I will help you. So I went home and I started to think about it. Now I have this blog that's got attention. I loved doing the keynote speech. I know I can help companies because I've just helped all these other companies get their customer experience better. And I'm like, maybe I could do this. So I called Shep and he did help. And he's like, okay, here's the thing. Join National Speakers Association. In fact, I love what you do with social media. You've got, for a like an executive who really wasn't, I had built quite a social media following. He's like, I think you're ahead of what a lot of our keynote speakers are doing with Twitter and some of these other aspects. So he's like, why don't you come speak at this next National Speakers Association conference? So here I am. I'm not even given any more than one keynote speak, and I'm the speaker at the National Speakers Association conference. on how to do social media. So it was really, really interesting. And he helped give me the confidence that I had, again, transferable skills.
Wow. Wow. See, every step of the way, we always have amazing angels in our shoulder, right? And then, talk to us and lift us up to the next level. And the thing is, Karen, you were able to take on those advices, thought about it, and took action on that. That makes you to go to the next level and achieving the thing that you do. And a lot of people got the same advices, but they could not pass the limiting belief within themselves, and kept them keep doing what they've been doing for a long time. So I want to say congratulations for taking that big calculated risk but big leap, and jumping to the next level like that. It's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
I there's a lot of executive friends of mine. By the time that they retire, Karin, they told me there's a few things that they regret, and you do both of them. All right, you did both of them well. You've been doing both of them. So one is, they could have started their own company when they was, in the C-suite level, and then they've been running $1 billion company. They can always start their own company, but they could not get out of the comfortability of, all the offerings at hand, right? But you left that, and then you create your own company together with David. That's very beautiful. The second thing is, they always wanted to write a book and sharing their stories, their experience with the people who had the chance to read, and maybe they in need of information and stories that they've been through, right? And they've yet doing this. So my wife and I, we kept on, keep on pushing them to say that it's not late. You can always do it now. So when you start the company together with your husband, after 3 years of blogging, after the first speech in Florida, and Chef basically was able to to help you along the way, but you literally resign at Verizon, leave all the benefit aside, and went on and go on in at a solo entrepreneur. That's not easy. So, what did you guys talk to one another back then to leave everything behind, start new, start fresh?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the love story part, because David and I did not know each other at that point.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was interesting. So David and I knew each other online, and not the swipe right, swipe left kind of online, but we knew each other from from blogging. So we both wrote about human-centered leadership. And one day he called me and he said, "Hey, when are you leaving Verizon?" Now this is awesome. Like, this second person, like, "When are you leaving Verizon?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Your posts are getting edgier. Like my writing is getting edgier." And it was. And he says, "I'm about a year ahead of you. I was an executive. I left. If you ever need any help, call me." So it's interesting. And then we had a lovely conversation and didn't really think much about it afterwards. And then a couple months after I had left Verizon, I go to a book publishing lab sponsored by the National Speakers Association. So basically, this is a conference in New York that you could go to learn how to write and publish a traditionally published book. How do you get a publisher? Do you need an agent? Or how do you structure your book? And I run into David. And we're like, "Oh, hey, it's you. Isn't that fun?" And, "Well, what book are you writing?" And he explains his book. And I'm like, "That's pretty much the same book I'm writing." And so we said, "Well, gosh, maybe we should collaborate, because are we going to both publish the same book and compete?" And he had a different background. So we decided to write the book together. And this was a book that became Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. And David was living in Colorado, and I'm 1,700 miles apart on the East Coast in Maryland. We write the entire book together. We're talking pretty much every single day but mostly not voice to voice, mostly Facebook Messenger chat, right? We're like, and we find that we have a very different, we're grounded in very, very similar values, and our approach to leadership is the same. But David is really structured. We got to have an outline. We got to do this. And I'm like, what's our vision? How are we going to market the book? We should make Converse high top shoes with Winning Well on them. We're just like really, really different. And so that was an incredible partnership. Well, during this time, a lot of things happened. There was a lot of tragedy that happened. My mother died. He had some stuff that went on. We had become really, really good friends. Now we're getting ready to publish this book, and he calls me and he's like, Karin, you'll be so proud of me. This girl asked me out. I think I'm gonna go on this date. And I was like, no. I felt really jealous, which I didn't know I had feelings for him. And I said, wait a minute, you're gonna go on a date? And then I said, well, what kind of girl are you looking for? And he described all this. And I said, oh, okay. So then a little bit later, I thought about it. And then I texted him that night and I said, what kind of girl are you looking for? And he's like, and he told me again. I said, well, what if they had a child already had a child? That'd be fine if for the right person. Why would that matter? Well, what if they lived like across the country? Well, for the right person, why would that matter? And basically, I'm totally describing myself. And it's going like, he's not picking up. And I said, well, what if like she spelled her name kind of weird, like with an I? So Karin with an I. He's like, oh my gosh. So then he says, let me think about it. Because that's, because clearly we would have a problem. Like if we dated and we broke up, it would be a problem because we were already seriously not running a business together, but we were co-authors together. And, you don't want to mess that up. So he basically said, I had to decide before I decided to date you, whether I would marry you. And so long story short, we got married. We merged our businesses together. He moved to Maryland. And that's our love story. So if you've got listeners who need to find true love after 40, that's an approach. Write a book.
And ask leading questions, right? How long did it take him until he realized that you basically was describing, questioning about yourself?
He's not as quick as you think he might be. No, it was about 20 minutes before he realized.
Or maybe you're wrong. Maybe he was describing the girl that he loved to date pretty much like you also.
Could be.
Could be, right? So how's the feeling of writing together and working together as husband and wife?
It's got its ups and downs. It is amazing to be able to collaborate in this way and to really build something like this together. Not just we build the books, the IP, the curriculum, but we also it almost feels like we're dancing when we go in front of an audience. We know when he should jump in and when I should jump in, and we know how to manage the energy level of the room. And he's got he has a more quiet, deliberate, more introverted, wise approach. And I have a more, yesterday I was doing a virtual keynote and somebody types into the chat, I don't need my espresso machine anymore because of listening to you. So, my energy, I have a very energetic approach. So that's a nice way to dance together. And that took time to be able to do that well. And so that feels good. But it's also stressful because it's our whole life. It's very hard to turn it off. And, you wake up and you're having breakfast and you're talking about work. And I find that particularly hard to know when to turn it off. And when the work stress is bad, when there's a lot going on, when there's things that are uncertain, it's easy to carry that in, and want to talk about it all the time. And so we've got to work through that. We've gotten better at it. The other thing is we really had to define our roles, because he was a solopreneur and I was a solopreneur who had done all the things. And when we first got together, there was a little bit of a clash, because who makes the decision? And we had very different approaches. And what really helped, both from our company and for our marriage, is to say, this is your role and this is your role. And so I do the sales and the marketing. I do a lot of our strategic, like the big vision stuff. He is incredible at operations. And so that is a very good combination. But if we are in disagreement about something, we'll say, we know who owns the decision. Like, he'll weigh in on a marketing decision, but if I disagree, he'll be like, okay, but it's your call. And the same thing, like, he really wanted to implement Basecamp in our company. I didn't really want to, but it was his call, and so he's like, no, I see this, these are the reasons. And I'm like, all right, well, that's your call. That's what our agreement is. And that really works pretty well.
Wow, thanks a lot. Karin, you and David are models for a lot of people, including my wife and I, because we are working on the book together for the first time. But I know out there's a lot of people, there's a lot of couple want to do things together. And like you say, there will be a lot of, because basically we were 24 hours a day together, right? Work together, write the book together, live together. Then we need a break sometimes for each of us to have some room to breathe and do the things that we wanted to do. So thanks for sharing the advices so that the listeners they
what is your book?
Oh, interesting. Thanks for asking. So you are the 474th person joining our show in 15 months. And,
wow.
By the end of this conversation, we're going to ask you the question about the book. And by then I'll share with you. Is that okay?
Okay.
All righty. I know that the book, Courageous Cultures, you published 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago. Karin?
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that book? How did you and Dave came up to that idea and write that book?
Yeah, so it was interesting. We were working across a variety of industries all over the world, and we were noticing a consistent pattern. We would go in to work at the C-level or very senior level of these organizations, and we would hear things like, why don't more people speak up and share their ideas? Why am I the one that has to discover these best practices? Why don't people see these problems and figure out how to fix them? And then we would go in to do training at the front line, at the supervisor level, or even the entry level of these organizations, and we would hear things like, nobody wants my ideas. The last time I spoke up, I got in trouble. Nothing ever happens anyway. Why bother? And we thought, are you all working for the same company? So employees have ideas, and most leaders really do want to hear them, and somehow there was a disconnect. So we partnered with the University of North Colorado, a team of PhDs, on an extensive research study to find out when people were holding back ideas, what kinds of ideas were they holding back? And they weren't trivial. It wasn't like, oh, I wish we had kombucha in the break room or virtual Taco Tuesdays. They said they were holding back ideas to improve the customer experience, the employee experience, or productivity in a process. And then we said, well, why are you not speaking up? And then we found, well, 40% lacked the confidence to share their ideas. 49% said they're not regularly asked for their ideas. 50% said nothing would ever happen anyway, so why bother? 67% said my manager operates around the notion of this is the way we've always done it. So we took that research and then we turned it into very practical tools and techniques to do two things. One, to help managers and leaders really ask for people's ideas and respond well to those ideas. And to give people the courage to speak up, to share their ideas, and to do it in a way that's more likely to be heard. So that book is now translated into pretty extensive culture work that we are doing it across a variety of companies, both in helping to build courageous cultures, but also to help people have a bit more courage, to speak up, to share their ideas.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that one of the things that came up during the pandemic, that people left companies because the coaches there, did not give them the chance to speak up, or the voice not being heard. And a part coming from their ends because they did not speak up, but another part is because the culture, the system, the way it worked, it didn't allow people to also, can raise their voice. So your words is very important. And you know what, Karen? I think the courageous also, that is also in your character. So when you came out and you work with people, I think it's easy for them to see that you have what it takes to do all of that. So, right? If you pick one chapter in the book that you wanna, you like most and you want to share with our audience, what would that chapter be, Karen?
So I really like the cultivate curiosity. So we have a 7-step process. And so it starts with navigating your own narrative around, so that's the first section is around navigating your narrative about speaking up. And then we talk about creating clarity, that you really want people's ideas and clarity so people understand strategically where we're headed. And then the next section is about cultivating curiosity. And that's really where what I love is, how do you equip people to proactively go out and ask people for their ideas? So we have a couple of techniques for that, including asking courageous questions that are specific and vulnerable and assume that improvement is possible. And then we have a technique called Own the Ugly, which is 4 strategic questions. U, what are we underestimating? G, what's got to go? L, where are we losing? Y, where are we missing the yes? And that helps to create ideation and gets people to get to the root cause of a problem. And then our idea model to help vet ideas. I, why is this idea interesting? D, why is it doable? E, who is engaging? Who else do you need to engage? And A, actions, what are a couple of recommended next steps? You see I like acronyms. So if an acronym spells a real word, I made it up. If it doesn't spell a real word, then it's David's, but we like to say. But that really is my favorite chapter of the book. In chapter 6, I also like chapter 6 because I share a story from a case study from my sales team at Verizon about how we basically did this whole process and got transformational results. So I'm particularly proud of that chapter too. But David will, I think you're interviewing him later, and he has a different chapter that he likes, so I won't spoil it.
I'll ask, I'll make sure that I ask him because we are going to interview him later. So Karen, out of curiosity, because you said that one of the chapter that you like was a chapter about curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever stay curious and ask yourself this question: for everything that you've been doing, it's really, really successful and good. Did you ask yourself, that question to figure out the reason behind?
Ask the question of the only ugly question, or ask what question?
Because, like, have you ever stay curious to know why everything that you did, every job that you did, it ended up really, really well? You wanted to become like a Broadway star, right? So you gather all of your cousin and then do the performance when everybody was young, right? Then you get into every job that you do, it ended up really, really well. You joined the management training at the bank. You came out at the top person, right? And you became a very successful in HR, very successful in running the customer service department, very successful in running the sales team, and even now you at the book or running your own company is very successful. Did you ask you the curious question of what is the secret sauce that made all of that happen, though?
It's interesting, and of course, behind in all of that, there are stressful times. There are things that didn't work, right? So I don't want to make it look like, oh, it was just so easy. I knew exactly what to do, right? in some cases, there was a lot of I mean, there were long, long, long hours. There were, part of my passion for human-centered leadership is that I worked for some really crappy bosses and in some really toxic work environments along the way. Not all of them. Some of them were fantastic. But I think that is so. One of the things if I had to say where did the success come from, is I am passionate about not getting stuck in a bad situation. So, all right, so I'm willing to undo a situation, right? So I was at the bank and it didn't go as they promised. I think some people would stay, but I am passionate about, I'm not going to let things happen to me. Things happen to me, right? They happen to everybody, but I'm going to do whatever I can to try to influence the situation. And I think that is part of it is, and that would be my best advice for people. You have more power than you think, more agency in your own life. And I have a very, very good friend who is stuck and could be doing this kind of work. I think has a equal passion for this kind of work, a equal skill set for this kind of work, and is stuck in a corporate, and I won't tell you where, but is stuck in a corporate job because he's just too scared. He's just too scared. He's like, well, what if it doesn't work? What about my family? What about the money? And that makes me super sad because I think he will have regrets. And every time I talk with him, he's like, yeah, someday. And I'm like, you're not getting any younger, I mean, it's someday, I think this is the day, right? Because he's my age. And at some point, if you're going to do it, it takes a minute to build it. So, yeah, so I think that's the thing, that would be my advice for people. I don't want to say that it's easy. And I have very stressful days. And, being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster. Right now, I have 3 really significant contracts out there that may or may not go for next year, right? They're good. Can the company afford it? Will they choose someone else? And so, you have to get comfortable with all that level of uncertainty, which is not easy. It's not easy. And that's probably been the hardest thing for me is getting accustomed to living in that level of uncertainty. And not, you can have agency, but you can't have agency for everything. You can't make them choose you, right? So you can influence it. You can do the best you can. But then other circumstances. Or, we've been working in a company and the budget just gets cut. And it's they've got other things and it doesn't have anything to do with you, but there you go. And so you have to get used to that. And I would say that's the thing. I think the curiosity is, I am A, willing to take risk and influence my own environment, and B, I am not perfectly good at this, but I'm getting better at being willing to live in uncertainty a bit.
And personally, I wish you not only get that 3 significant contracts for next year, but have more of that. Okay. And Karin, I have 2 last questions for us today. And the first question is about thinking. So in your life, in your work, it requires you to do a lot of thinking, right? So my wife and I, we are on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think. And every chance that, because we believe that our thinking capability these days is diminishing. So every chance that we talk to experts like you, we will ask this question. So Karin, how have you been helping you to improve the ability to think over the years?
Well, that's interesting. I think the most important thing is to give yourself space to think. And it is so difficult, our world, there is so many things going on, right? It's a constant fire of work to do, tasks. And one of the things that we really work on in our own business, in our own lives, and help our clients with is, what is the most important thing? You know, because you're not going to accomplish everything equally well. And so if you can structure your thinking on what is the most important thing, or for our clients, what are the 3 most important things they can do strategically as a business, and then to think critically about those 3 things, and to be willing to say, yeah, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that, and we're going to stop doing this, and we're going to take a moment and really think about how do we do this well. And sometimes that really that takes a lot of courage, because you could be down a path of something and then the world shifts. And, you know, I know when we shifted with the pandemic, you know, it was like we had to stop and think, because 90% of our work was in person. And I watched our calendars we are launching a book, and all the conferences that I was supposed to sell books at 500 and 1,000 at a time all got wiped off of our, you know, so you can either be like, oh no, we just failed. Or you could say, all right, let's think about this. What has become the most important thing? And I'm like, well, what's become the most important thing is not creating a best-selling book, because I'm not going to sell it at the volume. But what's the most important thing is using these Courageous Cultures tools to help transform organizations of a time of critical need. And so we didn't sell as many books as I had hoped, although it's still selling. It's doing pretty good. But we have done is sold, you know, really big culture change initiatives, which is a lot more fun than selling books, you know. So I think that's the thing is, do you really know what matters most? And that would be my biggest advice for anybody in terms of teaching critical thinking. And my second thing is, it's very interesting as people come to us and say, you know, my team doesn't think critically. You know, we hear that all the time. I don't know, they just don't have it. They don't have that competency. Most of the time when I dig underneath that, it's that they don't have enough strategic information to think critically. Like, so really making sure people understand your business. If you want them to think, make sure they get it, and how you make money, and why your values matter, and what your brand is for your customers. Because if you say, you know, I find that even with our own team, sometimes they'll want to do something and I'm like, no, that's like, but I'm like, but that's my fault. If they think that's a good idea, then that's my fault, because they don't fully understand really where we're headed. And that, so I have to own that to help them think more critically.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now I answer you the question about the book that my wife and I are writing on. And after interview more than 400 people, right? And then we just realized that we can write a book on thinking, because
Nice.
you know, we ask the people, you know, about their secret of thinking, and then now, and then we break the thinking into 8 acronyms, just like you did with the word ugly and idea, right? So the T is represented for the time. So it means that we have to put the space and time for thinking, right? And then the H is for the heart, and the heart, so like the head, you know, using the head to think. A lot of time have to use the heart to think, because we're gonna mess between the stories and the science. My wife is gonna do the hard works, which is the science part, because I'm the one that interview a lot of people together with her. So I'm gonna bring the story that you mentioned in here and put it in. Let's, you know, a lot of people don't have the strategic information for them to form the strategic thinking, because the K in the word thinking represent for knowledge. So you have to find information, you have to update the knowledge, you have to find ways to get more information in, so that you can have the good data to you know, like to think. So we're gonna write that book together, and we share with you. And when we finish that, along the way, if you have any question, then we ask you, Karin. All right?
Nice. Well, I would love to have you on my show when the book is getting ready to be published. So I run a LinkedIn show called Asking for a Friend. I would love to invite you and your wife on the show.
Wonderful. We would love to be part of that. And I know that I asked you for 45, 50 minutes. We're over the time already. I'll ask you the last questions. Okay. Karin, is there anything you are working on, or you and David are working on, that exciting you want to share with us, so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Well, we have two things that we're doing. One is that we have been really going in and applying our Courageous Cultures tools on really with companies on really strategic initiatives that they're doing. So we just got back from working with Nestle in Switzerland. We've been helping them build a care and dare culture. And we spent one of the days that we were there taking 4 of their key strategic initiatives, doing the Own the Ugly, using the idea model in teams to come up with really good concrete ideas to help improve their strategic initiatives. That was so much fun. We love doing that. So I'm hopeful that we'll be doing more of that because it really does make an impact for customers. And then we are working on our next book too. Which is all about powerful phrases for dealing with conflict at work, dealing with difficult people, difficult situations. So more to come on that as well.
Congratulations, congratulations. When do you think the book is going to be launching?
We're probably a year out. We're publishing it. You know, our publisher actually came to us and asked us to write it. So we're right now in the beginning stages of organizing it. So.
Exciting, exciting. You let us know along the way, all right? So I will check on you and Dave along the way to give you some words of support, you know.
Oh, thank you. What you're doing sounds really exciting, and I look forward to learning more about that too.
Thank you, Karin. Thanks a lot for being so generous to join our show and share your stories. It's a lot of amazing advice and beautiful stories along the way. So I want to say thank you. I wish you well. I wish you have all the support and the resources you need to continue growing your business and helping the leaders around the world. Okay?
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely my pleasure.
Okay. Karin, goodbye for now. And I'll see you sometime.
All right. Bye-bye.